Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the shadowy halls of a medieval castle. Cold stone walls, flickering torchlight, the soft crunch of straw beneath your boots. Outside, the wind howls through narrow arrow slits, and somewhere in the distance a wolf answers. Inside, not much better. The chill here isn't just in the air, it's in the bones of the stone. These walls were made for war, not warmth. You've just arrived after a long, muddy journey. Your fingers are stiff. Your nose is already numb. The great hall greets you with a bitter mix of smells. Old smoke, wet wool, and maybe a turnip that gave up days ago. You're here to sleep, but the castle has other plans. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, where are you listening from and what time is it right now? Let me know in the comments. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You cross the hall slowly, one boot step at a time, past a long wooden table still cluttered from supper. Bones, crusts, a mug lying sideways. There's a dog curled beneath the bench, fast asleep. You envy him. Near the far wall, you find your sleeping spot, a wooden platform, some straw, a wrinkled blanket folded on top. If you were noble, you'd have a private chamber, maybe even a fire. But you're here, with everyone else, sleeping in the open, among whispers, drafts, and the occasional mouse. A tapestry hangs above your bed, not for beauty, for insulation. It blocks some of the icy air, snaking through the cracks in the stone. You sit, then lie down. The straw crunches beneath you. The sackcloth smells faintly of stew, or sweat, or both. If you're lucky, no fleas tonight. If you're really lucky, the blanket doesn't have holes. Above you, the ceiling disappears into darkness. The hearth glows nearby, but it's 20 feet away. And the heat doesn't travel. Someone coughs. A door creaks open. You hear the soft jingle of chainmail. A guard change. Even when you sleep, this place doesn't. You shift. The blanket slips. The cold finds your back like it's been waiting for you. Historians still argue whether people truly slept in castles, or just dozed between danger and duty. Here's one historical fact. In winter, water would freeze in jugs kept indoors. Yes, indoors. And here's something quirky. Some nobles slept with hot stones wrapped in cloth under their feet. Did it help? Barely. But hey, barely was kind of the medieval way. Eventually, your body gives in. Your eyes close. And the cold? Well, you make peace with it. Just enough to drift away. You wake up with a start. Not because of a dream, but because your foot just touched something damp. It's straw. Always damp. Always slightly suspicious. You pull your blanket tighter. Not that it helps. Because here's the truth. Most people in castles didn't sleep in what we'd call a bed. Forget four-poster frames and soft pillows. Forget memory foam. Even mattress is generous. You glance across the room. There's a wooden platform against the wall. A narrow frame stuffed with hay. Maybe a thin sack of wool on top. That's for the wealthiest here. But you're lucky to have straw. Most servants slept on woven mats, or straight on the floor, bunched cloak under head, one arm over their coin pouch. In castles, bed was a flexible concept. Some slept sitting up, some curled beside hearths, some shared narrow bunks in shifts, especially the guards. And forget privacy. Even nobles often shared rooms with siblings, cousins, even their entourage. If you're imagining a nice fluffy blanket, adjust expectations. Blankets were made from coarse wool, heavy, scratchy, sometimes not even stitched. Just a big piece of woven fabric. Historians believe many people just slept in their clothes, which, to be fair, were probably also their working clothes. There's a trunk by the wall. Inside, folded spare linen, used only for guests. Maybe, if the rats haven't chewed through it yet. The servants, though, they didn't get trunks. They wrapped themselves in whatever they had, shawls, cloaks, or sometimes dried moss stuffed into worn boots. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some people used wooden bed warmers, little boxes filled with hot coals, tucked under the bed. Sounds cozy? They also caused fires, which is why castle floors were often scorched, and bed frames singed. Now imagine rolling over in the night, hearing creaking wood, wondering if it's your bunk collapsing or something catching fire. Still, for the nobility, beds were a status symbol. Big carved frames, tall enough to need steps, curtains to block out drafts, and sometimes embroidered sheets, though mostly for show. But you're not a lord. You're just visiting, and your back is starting to notice it. You shift again. The straw pokes through the sackcloth. There's something sharp. Maybe a pebble. Maybe a chicken bone someone forgot to sweep. Historians still argue about how much luxury really trickled down to castle dwellers. Was there a comfortable middle class inside these walls? Or just a handful of nobles and a swarm of freezing staff? What we know is this: sleep was practical, uncomfortable, and utterly necessary. You pull your blanket up to your chin. Tuck your hands underneath. Try not to think about what's crawling around under the straw. Someone snores nearby. Someone else shifts. You close your eyes again. You try to find that one warm spot you made with your breath. And for a moment, you almost forget you're sleeping on a glorified pile of barn scraps. Almost. You're not alone in this cold. Not even close. A shuffling sound near your feet makes you freeze. But it's nothing sinister, just someone settling in. Another body looking for warmth. Because here's a not-so-fun truth. In medieval castles, sleeping alone was a luxury. Staying warm meant sleeping together. And not in the romantic way you're imagining. You crack open one eye. There's a boy curled up against a hound. A woman with a baby tucked under her cloak. A guard with another guard practically lying on his shoulder. Blankets were rare. Body heat wasn't. The more people around you, the better your chances of not waking up frozen. You scoot slightly to the left, closer to someone you don't know. They don't flinch. They're doing the same thing. Even nobles weren't exempt. Siblings shared beds. Cousins bunked together during visits. Even lords might share with squires or advisors while traveling. It wasn't weird. It was survival. And animals? Absolutely part of the equation. Dogs were prized bedmates. Not just for companionship, but because they radiated warmth. Even small lapdogs had a job. Foot warmers. A quirky little fact: in some noble households, monkeys were kept as pets, and sometimes ended up curled beside their owners at night. Imagine waking up with a tiny primate stealing your blanket. And let's not forget servants. Many of them slept at the foot of their master's bed, literally, ready to jump up if called, or to keep the lord's feet warm, depending on who you ask. One record from a 14th century estate mentions 6 people. Yes, 6 sharing a single sleeping area in shifts. 3 slept while the other 3 worked, then swapped, like medieval bunk hot seating. The idea of personal space was laughable. You had maybe a few inches between your shoulder and someone else's breath. Hope you didn't snore. And if someone snored, you learned to live with it. Or you nudged them in your sleep. Gently, or not so gently. The sounds of sleep were everywhere. Breathing, snoring, murmurs, even the occasional grinding of teeth. You might feel someone roll onto your arm, or steal your half of the blanket, or talk in their sleep, spilling secrets or nonsense or worse. Still, there was comfort in the crowd. You weren't alone with your thoughts, or the cold, or the sound of rats scratching behind the walls. Some say the closeness bred trust. Others say it bred resentment. Historians still argue whether this constant proximity made medieval people more emotionally close, or just perpetually annoyed. Probably both. And yet something about it worked. People learned to share space. Share breath. Share warmth. You shift again. Someone's foot nudges yours. They don't apologize. You don't expect them to. There's a quiet understanding. We're in this together. Freezing. Tired. Alive. You stare up into the shadows, feeling the steady breathing of people all around you. Some gentle, some ragged, some snoring like broken bellows. The ceiling disappears into darkness. A tapestry sways slightly in the draft. Somewhere nearby, a baby gurgles in its sleep, and yet is oddly comforting. Here, in this cold castle, with bodies packed together like kindling, you realize something. This is what sleep looked like for most of history. Not silent, not solitary, not soft, but shared. Unpolished, and just warm enough to make it through the night. The cold doesn't let up. It never does. You'd think by now your body would adapt. But no, your nose is freezing. Your fingertips ache, and you haven't even removed your boots. Because that's the next thing you notice. You're still wearing everything. Your cloak, your tunic, even your belt. That's how people slept. Clothes stayed on. All of them. Forget silk pajamas or linen nightgowns. Those were fantasies for paintings, not real life. In a medieval castle, you slept in the same clothes you wore during the day. And probably the day before that. And the one before that, too. Laundry? Maybe once a month, if that. The rivers weren't warm, and soap was scarce. Your shirt sticks to your skin. Wool over linen. The fabric scratches your arms. But taking anything off means giving the cold a welcome invitation. Some people even slept with hats on, while caps, coifs, or hoods pulled down tight, because heat escapes through the head, and castles are basically glorified stone refrigerators. There's a guard in the corner. He hasn't moved in an hour, because movement means heat loss. You try not to think about sweat, because there's a lot of it, trapped beneath all those layers. And here's a historical fact that might make you itch. Fleas and lice were so common. People developed entire bedtime habits around scratching. You feel something on your neck. Ignore it. Hope for the best. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some folks, especially monks, slept in special sleeping cloaks. These were like medieval snuggies. Heavy, shapeless robes that doubled as both outerwear and blanket. Not fashionable, but practical. And yes, people sometimes slept sitting up. Why? Because beds were narrow. Because lying down in full armor was uncomfortable. Because superstitions claimed lying flat was too similar to death. You shift slightly. Your cloak bunches under your spine. Your belt digs in at the waist. But removing anything feels like too much of a risk. Historians still argue whether people actually cared about comfort the way we do. Or if they just didn't know any better. Maybe a lumpy bed and itchy clothes weren't seen as discomfort. Just life. You pull your hood tighter. Tuck your chin into your collar. Breathe slowly. Your breath warms the space beneath the blanket. Just a little pocket of livable air. Someone near you sneezes. No one says bless you. That's not a thing yet. You close your eyes again. Try to pretend the layers are softer. Try to imagine what silk might feel like. But then, a gust of wind sneaks through a loose shutter, finds the gap between your shoulder and blanket, and all your illusions melt. Nope, this is the Middle Ages. This is how people really slept. Fully dressed, fully itchy, fully determined not to freeze. You stare at the hearth across the hall. It glows faintly. A few weak embers hang on, trying not to die. The fire is almost out. And suddenly you remember. They told you the fireplace lies. It looks inviting. It looks like salvation. But in a medieval castle, that fireplace is mostly for show. Here's the truth. The stones absorb more heat than they give. Unless you're sitting right beside it, you might as well be standing in the wind. And even if you do sit close, you trade cold for smoke. Because chimneys? They weren't common. At best, you get a narrow flue cut into the wall. More often, it was just a hole in the ceiling. So the smoke lingers. It hugs the beams. It curls around the rafters. And then it drops. Into your lungs. Into your blanket. Into your dreams. You cough. Your throat feels like it's been sanded. Your eyes water. But nobody complains. This is just the way it is. Romantic fireside warmth? That's for storybooks and paintings, not for real castle nights. And the fuel? It's not seasoned oak or pine. Wood is precious, hard to transport, saved for special uses. So instead, they burn peat, twisted bundles of brush, even dried cow dung, which means the smoke smells like disappointment and farm animals. Here's a quirky tidbit. People used bed warmers, metal pans filled with hot coals, slid between sheets before bedtime. They were supposed to gently warm the mattress, but sometimes they scorched it, or set the bedding on fire, which is why some lords slept in stone alcoves. Easier to put out. You shift again on your straw mat. A breeze snakes down the hallway, finds the back of your neck, and plants itself there like it pays rent. There's a fire in the kitchen, and that one's stronger, but that heat stays where the stew is. The servants feel it. You don't. One historical account describes a lord sleeping with 4 fur blankets, 2 dogs, and a servant tucked under the covers. And still he complained of cold feet. You're not even that lucky. Just a threadbare blanket, and your own stubborn body heat. Historians still argue whether castles were ever warm. Even in summer, the thick walls trap cold like a sponge. People tried everything. Hanging heavy curtains, tacking up animal skins, stuffing cracks with straw. But still, the chill came in. You glance again at the hearth. The embers are dying. No one gets up to stoke it. Why would they? It won't help. Fireplaces in castles were more symbolic than practical. A flicker of light in a dark room, an illusion of comfort, but not much more. You pull your blanket tighter, cocoon yourself in layers. Try not to think about how your breath is visible inside the building. Outside, the wind whistles again. It presses against the walls like a creature hunting warmth, but there's nothing left to find. Inside, only breath, blankets, and 100 people pretending they're not freezing. You exhale slowly. Fog pours from your lips. You tuck your hands under your armpits. Wiggle your toes inside your boots. Still cold. Always cold. But this is what sleep looks like here. A fight. A flicker. A negotiation with frost. You're not sure how long you've been lying here. Time in the castle slips around like the wind. There's no clock. Only the steady drip of something cold somewhere in the dark. And then, you stir. But so does everyone else. Someone sits up. A few people shuffle past, boots thudding softly on the floorboards. A door creaks open. Someone whispers. Then silence again. Strange, right? But not unusual. Because here's the twist. In the Middle Ages, people didn't always sleep straight through the night. They had what historians call segmented sleep. 2 distinct chunks. First sleep and second sleep. Yes, people actually woke up in the middle of the night on purpose. You shift onto your side, trying to catch the whispers. They're quiet, but there's movement. Someone lights a candle. In this deep, cold stretch of night, people would rise from their beds. Not everyone, but enough. They prayed. Read by firelight if they were literate, checked on animals, even talked with neighbors. Some took midnight walks through the courtyard. Others snuck down to the kitchen for a leftover crust of bread. This wasn't insomnia. It was routine. Some scholars believe it helped people mentally reset, like 2 dreams for the price of 1. And in between those sleeps, something magical happened. A strange, reflective calm. You lie back and imagine it. The castle breathing slowly in the dark, whispers drifting between tapestries. A prayer mumbled into a fur blanket. A guard murmuring with his partner beside the fire. Here's a historical fact. Segmented sleep is recorded in medieval texts from England, France, and Italy. They even had names for it. The first sleep. And the second sleep. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some people believed that this middle-of-the-night moment was the best time to conceive children. Apparently, it was when your body was most rested. Go figure. You sit up now just slightly. Your blanket slips. Cold air bites your shoulder. You glance around. Some are still snoring. Some are tying up their cloaks. Some are just sitting, breathing, thinking. Historians still argue about when this practice faded. Was it the invention of artificial lighting? The Industrial Revolution? The rise of fixed work hours? Nobody knows for sure. But in the medieval castle, this quiet divide between sleeps was just a fact of life. You pull the blanket over your head again, trying to trap warmth. Outside, the wind groans. A shutter bangs. A dog barks once, then falls quiet. Your mind drifts. Maybe someone is praying. Maybe someone else is stealing something from the pantry. Maybe a servant is tiptoeing back to their place after sneaking off. You won't remember any of this clearly. It'll blur by morning. But for now, this waking moment inside the sleep, it's part of the night, part of how people lived, and how they dreamed. You close your eyes again, and just like that, second sleep begins. You awaken to muffled voices, a shuffle of feet, a hinge that needs oil. It's morning. Almost. Not that the castle gives you sunlight, just a slightly less terrifying shade of gray. But something's different now. There's structure, rhythm, purpose, because you're about to witness what sleep looks like when it's wrapped in power and ritual. A noble's bedtime, and all the ceremony that comes with it. You rub your eyes, sit up slowly, and peer across the hall. At the far end, a private chamber, guarded, draped in thick curtains. The Lord's quarters. He didn't sleep on straw. No, his bed is elevated. A carved wooden frame, curtains on all sides to keep in warmth, layers of linen, fur, and maybe even embroidered pillows. But the real warmth comes from the people. First, the servants. One laid out the bedding. Another warmed the coals. Someone else might have fluffed the furs with a long stick. The Lord didn't undress himself. That was a job. Literally. A valet or squire would unbuckle his cloak, remove his boots, and help him into his sleep tunic. Then came the ritual. A drink, perhaps. Herbal wine. Warm ale. Sometimes spiced milk. He might sit by the fire, tell a story, receive a message from another noble house, and then he'd retire to bed. Alone? Not always. He might share the bed with his wife, or not. Sometimes his children, sometimes an advisor during travel. In medieval life, sleeping arrangements were flexible, political, and occasionally very awkward. A quirky tidbit? Some nobles had tester beds, beds with canopies and curtains, not just for warmth, but to show off wealth. The more fabric, the richer you looked. In some cases, visitors toured the Lord's bedchamber, just to admire the bed like a piece of furniture art. Now here's a historical fact. Wealthy lords often owned multiple mattresses. One for summer, one for winter, different thickness, different stuffing. Some even slept on feather beds. Though feather beds attracted bugs, so they were rarely as luxurious as they sound. You imagine him now, tucked beneath velvet sheets, curtains drawn, a servant nearby with a candle, a dog at his feet, a carved box beside the bed with dried herbs, to ward off evil dreams. You, meanwhile, still have a straw poking your spine. Historians still debate how much actual comfort the nobility enjoyed. Did their beds keep them warm? Or were they just fancier prisons of cold? Did all the ritual really help them sleep better? Or just give the illusion of peace? You stretch your arms above your head. Your muscles ache. Your cloak is twisted around your waist. You're not a noble, but you saw what sleep looked like for one. And honestly, it's not all envy, because warmth may be easier with wealth. But sleep? Sleep is still a negotiation. Even in the nicest bedchamber. Behind the thickest curtain. Inside the tallest tower. A scream. No, just a shout. A sharp bark. Then silence. You're awake again. But not because it's morning. It's still dark. Still cold. Still night. Only now the castle feels different. Alert. Tense. Because here's something no one likes to talk about. Sleep in a medieval castle wasn't just uncomfortable. Could be dangerous. You sit up slowly. Blanket clutched tight. Heart thudding louder than you'd like. Someone's moving through the hall. Fast? Too fast for a sleepy wanderer. In the Middle Ages, even dreams had enemies. Let's talk risks. Fires, for one. Remember those cozy braziers? They tipped. They spilled. They caught bedding like it was soaked in oil. Servants had stories of waking up to the sound of someone screaming, not from a nightmare, but from flame. And those heavy bed curtains? Perfect for trapping heat. Also perfect for trapping smoke. Then there were the less dramatic threats, like rats. Not just the little scurriers, but bold, hungry ones, nibbling on whatever smelled like food or flesh. People kept daggers under pillows. Not for show. Burglars sometimes slipped into the castle with forged keys. Or worse, the danger came from inside. Assassins, poisoners, spies posing as servants. A noble might go to sleep with a cup of warm wine and wake up to a knife, or not wake up at all. Here's a historical fact. Castles often had secret passages, originally meant for escape, but sometimes used for intrusion. And let's not forget the guards, half-awake men in itchy armor, who might mistake a restless guest for an intruder. There were stories of accidental stabbings, misunderstandings that turned fatal. You glance at the far end of the hall. The Lord's chamber door is ajar. Someone standing just inside. Could be a servant. Or not. You lie back down. Slowly. Pretending to be asleep is safer. At least for now. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some castle dwellers kept geese inside. As a kind of living alarm system. Loud, territorial, and mean. They were better than dogs at detecting nighttime danger. Historians still argue about just how common these threats were. Was nightly danger routine? Or just the stuff of legends passed between servants? Maybe both. You pull the blanket over your head again. Heart slowing. Breathing in stale wool. Dust. And the faint scent of cold ashes. The footsteps fade. The hall settles. Sleep returns. Cautiously. Like a guest who's not quite sure they're welcome. But that was life in a castle. Even rest came with a warning. Comfort wasn't guaranteed. Safety wasn't promised. Just warmth if you were lucky. Company if you were really lucky. And no sudden noises in the dark. If the stars aligned just right. Still, you let go. Because exhaustion always wins. Even over fear. And tonight, like every night in the Middle Ages, you sleep with one ear open. You've made it through the night. The cold didn't take you. The fire didn't betray you. And no mysterious figures emerged from the shadows. Now, as the faintest hint of morning light seeps through the stone slits in the wall, you feel the weight of the castle soften just a little. Not warmer, just less sharp. The breath of sleeping bodies still rises around you, slow and steady. The dog by the bench twitches in a dream. A guard yawns behind a half-closed door. Even the wind seems to hush. As if it, too, is drifting off. You shift beneath the coarse wool. And for once, you're not searching for warmth. Just staying still. You've shared the silence, the straw, and the strange peace of medieval sleep. And now, you let your thoughts blur gently at the edges. Let the flicker of torchlight behind your eyelids fade to black. There are no battles tonight. No noise. No fear. No frostbite. Just this. The quiet hum of a world long gone. settling into stillness. You're safe now, wrapped in history, and a bit of scratchy wool. So go ahead, close your eyes for real, and drift